this video, I want to talk about Luke Smith. Now, Luke Smith, you can see on your screen right now, he has 216,000 YouTube subscribers. And he's talking about in this video, which we're going to go through, is how you'll never go wrong choosing independence, and how NEETs rule, which are men or people in general who are not in education, employment or training, and wages rule are people who have standard jobs. And that might sound a bit over the top, and we're going to go through it in a bit of detail. But essentially what he covers and what he covers on his channel, he doesn't post as much on YouTube as much as he used to, because I think he's just focused on his personal life. But he has many interesting concepts, and some of the key concepts around living independently from this system, about not getting too caught up in materialism. He's made some money himself through crypto. He used to work in academia, in like the educational system at like universities. I think he was a university lecturer. But then through saving and investing and moving out of a major city to live in a more rural area, he's kind of changed his focus on life. He focused on growing some food, spending time with family, more focused on religious endeavors, his health, staying away from psyops, minimalism, things like that. He has many different skills he's developed. He's learned how to code himself. He's quite focused on, like I say, minimalism, being productive and living a fulfilling life. And if you're familiar with Ted Kaczynski, who I'm sure many of you are if you watch my channel, he covers some of these theories about how modern society kind of isn't functioning, it's not making people feel fulfilled. But we need to kind of walk away from society, choose freedom over stability, take a risk, and really win at life. So let's listen to his ideas here.
I guess the rule of thumb that I now live by is that if I have a decision and one of the choices will make me more independent and the other will make me more dependent, I will always choose the one that makes me more independent, okay? Now, a couple of years ago when this sort of came to my head, maybe it was inspiration or something like that, or maybe I just read it somewhere and, don't remember where I read it.
Now, I know that's a very quick clip. We're going to go back and dive into other things he has to say, but this is what I want you to understand. In this system, normally people will think, well, if it makes me more money, I'll just pursue it. But if it makes you more money and you're trapped, is it really the best solution? For example, people automatically think if they're on a career path, no, let me take the next step in my career and get promoted because I'll make an extra 5, 10, 20 grand or more. But if you're not happy in that job, if it's not bringing you the fulfillment you want and you're kind of still feeling trapped, even if you're making a little more money, it's not going to be a major life changer, right? And if you want radical freedom, and I think the goal in this society really should be for many people freedom rather than just finances for the sake of it, because like I say, social status items is clearly not bringing people fulfillment. And we live in a society that's kind of broken, so you can't really be too concerned with how other people are judging you, right? So if you want radical freedom from the current status quo, you're going to have to make some radical choices. In his case, it was major moves in his income sources and moving to a more rural area. And these type of radical choices for radical freedom are kind of important. Seeing life as a bit of a flow chart. Like, is it going to make me more free, or is it going to make me more trapped, maybe with more money, but higher living costs? So an example would be, do you want to continue your career in the office, or do you want to focus on more remote jobs where you might be getting paid less, but at least it gives you the ability to live in a lower cost area, right? Think about what would make you more free from the system, and freedom is the key in this matrix. Is the key to unlocking this matrix and being free from it. And I understand it's kind of harder and harder to achieve that, but I think it's still a worthwhile pursuit.
Lottery or something like that. I was in my PhD program. A bunch of terrible things were happening. That was a terrible place in Arizona. And, I realized that despite the fact that I was in some sense achieving in the worldly sense, I was getting this advanced degree. I was hobnobbing with a bunch of people who were, famous enough to have Wikipedia pages and stuff like that. And you feel like you're in a big place or around people who actually matter. But the fact of the matter is I felt every passing moment, I was less free in what I could do. That wasn't just in terms of, I have to live in this particular place. Like in the city, I don't really have control over, where I get my food, and I'm always rushed for time and stuff like that. But it's also, especially nowadays in universities, the environment, I guess the most charitable way you could describe it is highly stifling, okay? You just don't want to be around there. It's just not a good place. And, I could definitely feel that increasing. This was especially the case when I started my PhD program. I guess that was when, the 2016 election was in about that period. So, people in universities were always witch hunting, you know what I mean? So that was a really miserable environment to be in no matter what.
So as I say, he worked, within universities around a PhD, and they were quite liberal universities, or any workplaces are. And it's all about finding fulfillment, right? Because what I'm saying here is, many people who are focused on pursuing these other type of social status items, it's kind of, those type of things they just pale in comparison when it comes to freedom and, spending time in nature, as he has more time to do these days, right? And if you have more free time, you can focus on more healthy food, making food for yourself, rather than being rushed in maybe a career that you don't find fulfilling, where you don't have time to focus on your health as much. And you realize it's kind of a rigged game, high living costs, dysfunctional social dynamics. It might not work for you. And then when he's talking about universities, right, and in this system, everything is inverted. Everything's the opposite of what they say it should be. You should think university, even more than corporate environments, would be places where you can be free thinkers, right? But you can't really think for yourself, particularly in those environments where it is a lot of censorship and heavy leftist bias. So, like I say, everything in this system is the opposite of what they tell you it is, right? Universities meant to be a place for free thought, but it's the opposite of truth, goodness, and reality in many cases. In the same way with the media lying about the truth, what the truth is the opposite of what they tell you. And it's the same thing when you might be working a job. Not in all cases, but in some cases, you might think it's about being productive and making the company profitable, but it's actually the opposite. It's about coercive control in many cases. It's about copious amounts of meaningless paperwork that isn't helping the company be more productive or profitable. So it's worthwhile considering how pursuing the opposite of the opposite might be an option. And what I mean by that, you might think, oh, I'm going to go and study hard, but do people who study hard actually make a ton of money? Oh, I'm going to go and be productive at work, but do people productive at work actually get promoted? Or is it the opposite? The people who are least productive and play politics, or the people at university who are more popular than focusing on their studies that actually succeed in life? So it's really worthwhile thinking about the opposite. And in his case, if he wanted to pursue his end goal, which could be considered financial freedom, he managed to achieve it much quicker by stepping out of that kind of university type of career to make some investments and lower his living cost. So it's all about outsmarting this kind of rigged game, right? And there's a term for this, it's called the inversion agenda, where the system has inverted everything. So it's worthwhile considering different perspectives when you are being willing to take a risk to pursue your freedom in this society.
Catch up with you. And so I had this decision, basically, do I want to continue in this a way of living, or do I want to abandon it? And of course, abandoning it comes with a bunch of negative things. You lose what you've been working for. You lose what you've been told that is always the goal. Oh yeah, you want to get educated, get a wage cut job, or some kind of high-end job, something like that. You got to make 6 figures right off the bat and stuff like this. And where on the other hand, my other choices were basically, I'll just go into the woods or something like that. But I will tell you, that was definitely the best decision I've ever made. It wasn't a decision that happened immediately, but when I had that opportunity, when I adopted that heuristic, that rule of thumb, if I had a decision, do I want to stay around here for another year or do I want to move? Well, okay, I'm going to move. I'm going to be where I want, even if that means me being less connected with my department or whatever. Or what kind of things am I going to study? What am I going to do? I basically just made the decision, I'm just going to do whatever makes me more independent. And, one of the things we talk about on this channel is how people become extremely reliant on the technology they use. And that's why, the best technology to use is always just no technology, right? For most of the things. I was actually going to do a video on that, but, so every decision I started making within the course of the year put me further and made me more and more free. Now, it came at a cost. Let's just say that I'd be making more money if I were somewhere else. Maybe I would have gotten a big job. Maybe I would have finished my PhD already. A bunch of different maybes. But I'd be in a much less free place. Certainly wouldn't have my own place to live or my own house. I'd probably actually be paying way more to live in some stupid apartment, around people who are, again, just stifling and stuff like that. So I definitely don't regret moving out here at all. Again, it's like the best decision of my life. And the reality is,
So just before we continue with this clip, so what you're saying is quite important. You abandoning that social status, that drive to be part of the system can really pay off. And I understand that's difficult because a lot of people, they have sunk costs, and sunk costs is like an economic term where you've already invested time, energy and money into doing something. And then when you're pivoting away from it, it's a bit hard because you're already too invested in it, right? Maybe you did do a PhD in, let's just say, economics, for example, and then you want to pivot to another career, you want to pivot more to living a lower cost lifestyle where you might have to step away completely from that type of profession. Is very difficult, but that's something worthwhile considering, right? What are the benefits of that type of pursuit you're on, and being willing to take the risk and take a step away, right? Even if you're educated, you've got a wage job and it might be paying well and it's giving you all the benefits of fitting in a society, but those constant feelings you might have of feeling uncomfortable in it might be the sign that, like you're saying, there's a phrase you might have seen on 4chan and other websites, moving in a woods, which is INNA woods, which is just basically saying, oh, let me drop out of society, spend more time in nature, live a bit more like a monk, even if you have a family, kind of having your family move out too with you, right? And that in many ways could be worth and be more fulfilling than the social status of having a job, right? And the thing is, when you're in this society, in this system sometimes, right, maybe if you have high rent, maybe if you have lots of very tight controls and censorship on your free thought and your opinion at work, or in a university environment, in his case, right, you feel like you're walking on a tightrope. That's something you feel like continuously in this society. And I think that's why many people have symptoms of anxiety, which can be justified, because it's like you're walking on a tightrope, or you're walking on thin ice, or you're chasing a dream, but it's like it feels like any moment it could slip outside your hands. You could say something and you get cancelled. You could maybe make a wrong decision and then you lose your job. Even a small little mistake could be used as justification to fire you and make you put you up for a layoff. So these are the things about becoming more independent and less dependent on the system can work out for you, right? So he left a PhD and what could be a good job for a win, right? Because he spends more time in nature, which he wants to do. He has a bigger house. So he doesn't describe it in this clip, but in general, he has a bigger house, better living standards for himself, more time in freedom and peace and quiet, spending some time with his wife and things like that, spending more time dedicated to his religion. He's Catholic. So more and more men are kind of walking away because they see the system as rigged in one sense or the other.
It's always going to be good in the long term. I'm not saying that you should always be like, oh, I'm not going to take a job because it's going to make me less free. Because there is a sense in which the money you might get, that might make you more free, right? But I think the boomer generation definitely lived by this mindset of they're just always going to be company men. They're always going to get more and more money, and then they'll just hope that they don't lose their freedom in the meantime, which, and they just took it to such an extent that, they lost basically everything. They're the most mentally domesticated people in the whole world. Nowadays you still have people like, you have Redditors who are upcoming based and basically make their decisions and constantly worry about what other people think. But for everyone else, for all the rest of us, right, we have a lot of choices about what makes us freer and what makes us less free. And the reality is it's not just a buzzword. I'm not using freedom or independence as a buzzword. I'm saying when the world is falling apart, like, now, I don't know if it's actually falling apart, but when, society as a whole, which is highly interreliant, when there's some kind of mess in that system, well, out here, it doesn't make a lick of difference to me. It literally doesn't. I mean, like, I'm not exactly a prepper, but when stuff started shutting down, I realized, between my pantry and all this stuff, I have like months and months of food. If I needed to actually stay here for a while, it'd actually be really easy. And that's just the natural environment, living in a place where you're more independent, right? You think about things like everything you do is a long-term investment. That was one of the best things when I moved out here. I could start getting things, start getting woodworking tools. I have a place to put them. I can start thinking about, maybe I'm not even going to use this immediately, but I can always invest in my house and all this other stuff. So now that you have your own place to live instead of living in an apartment or something like that, it's just fantastic. It's great, and the people around here are totally different. Like, they're so much less domesticated than people in cities. People in cities are always thinking about what each other think and stuff like that. It's just really unhealthy, especially nowadays. Everyone's plugged into their social media and all this stuff. Out here it's just sort of put out or show up.
So he's making many good points here, right? So firstly, this is the thing. To what extent do you have security, and how independent are you from the system, right? You might think you have a lot of sustainability in your job, but as we've seen, layoffs have been quite common. And also, I want you to think about the long-term play he mentions, where you might be working a job for now and you keep your future goals to yourself, saving that money or investing it because you want to move abroad in the future, you want to move to a more rural area, as he's saying. And the key thing is not letting that false sense of security in your current job or your education, whatever you're doing, lull you into being a boomer, which would be being so focused on comfort, security, and safety, which is all an illusion, right? You don't want to fall under illusion, oh, I'll be safe forever in my current company, and then after 10 or 20 years of sacrificing all your time for the company, they lay you off and couldn't care less about you, right? There's no real sustainability. And he's mentioning a good point also about worrying about social status. Let's say that should be a non-factor, so maybe that's a goal for you this year. Don't worry about social status, because so many people feel behind in life comparing themselves to others. You don't know what others' financial situation might be. If they get a layoff tomorrow, can they pay their mortgage for their big house? If they have some kind of difficulty, are they relying on credit cards and things like that? Did they live conservatively in terms of their finances? You never know what people's circumstances are, right? And the thing is not to get caught up in this kind of meaningless psyop type of culture, like I say, being so focused on what everyone else is doing. Now, a key thing here is about being independent, because we've seen time and time again how this system's kind of failed people. We've seen natural disasters, even in developed countries like, I haven't been keeping up with the news too much, but when there's a tornado, there's a power cut, when there's a flood, even in the UK, the government can only do so much. And we see how much the government's failing its own citizens, a lack of water supply, and then people have to rely on bottled water and ration that out, and they don't have enough for that, or they don't have emergency food. So I would recommend you really try to see yourself be as self-sufficient as possible, whether that's stocking up on food. I'm not saying there's going to be a lockdown tomorrow, but as long as you've got some preparation for 3, 6, 12 months, depending on the size you have, having water filters, if you've got space, growing your own food, being financially independent, having different types of wealth, whether that's crypto, gold, physical gold bars, all types of options are available to you, right? Don't get too caught up in this sense of, for some people, depending on your perspective, if you think Trump's going to be leading the US in the right direction, if you're more right-wing leaning, don't think he's going to save you. No one's really going to save you. You're going to save yourself at the end of the day. And the decisions he's making are kind of smart. They're all focused on independence, self-sufficiency, minimalism, long-term sustainable approach to life, rather than thinking somehow you're going to be able to sustain yourself in what is an obviously collapsing social state in the West.
Matters, this is an Uncle Ted thing, of course. The great thing about being independent is that you can always see what your work is doing. You can go out and till a garden or something like that. You can go out and create something. Once you have that ability, you don't have to think about the opinions of others, because you see what you're doing, right? Whereas if you live in a city and you're constantly plugged into the system, even though there are a lot of things in the system that are much more efficient, right? Oh, it can get us food more economically efficiently and stuff like that. One, there's the thing of everything being reliant on each other. So again, if something has to close down, everything falls apart. And two, it's really, it's hard to explain. You don't really feel like you contribute to the system, and you really don't. You're not really necessary in the way that you are here. So yeah, that's what I say. So if I have recommendations for people, it would just be live by that heuristic. Now, I'm not telling you immediately to just move out into the woods or something like that. Your life conditions might be different. I don't know. I'm not going to speak for other people, but I definitely recommend it. Basically, every life decision, if it makes you more independent, it's probably going to be good. Now, of course, that doesn't mean, you mean that in a limited sense. Let's say the example of getting married, right? So getting married, if you're getting married to a high maintenance person, right, that's probably going to make you more dependent on them. You're going to have to constantly think about them, stuff like that. But if you get into a good marriage, right, but if you get married to a decent person, right, that should be someone who makes you more independent, right? Because you can rely on them to do things and otherwise. And that's the same thing with all your friendships. If you have friends who you think are a big liability, right? If it's a big pain to keep up with them, watch their feelings or something like that. I mean, it's not just the feelings thing. But that's one of the things, a recommendation I have for people in general is just especially younger people, just have less friends, okay? This is an honest recommendation. Because a lot of people, and it has to do with your personal independence. So I think when you're young, especially, you sort of want to be the alpha male. You want to have all these friends and stuff like that. But the reality is most of those people won't last a couple of years. You're not going to be talking to them anyway. So you might as well focus on what's real. You know what I mean? I just have a lot of regret. If I could go back, I would care so much less about that kind of stuff. Like, not just, I'm not talking about social life in general. I'm just saying there's so much noise in your life that people worry about, all this stuff on social media and stuff like that. I definitely believe if it's on the internet, it's not real. You know, that's why my YouTube channel, it's not really real. It's just like a figment of my imagination that I do for some reason, and then somehow I get ad revenue occasionally or something. I don't know where that comes. It just comes out of the sky. That's how I think about it.
Used to focus on not being opinion driven, and many people are opinion driven. They refuse to take risks in their life, in their career, or with their finances, because it's always like, oh, how will other people judge me? Oh, will my family and friends judge me if I have a YouTube channel? Will my co-workers judge me if I make a significant shift in my career path? Because they'll probably think you're doing the wrong thing because you're not following the traditional career path approach. For example, if you're moving from working in finance to working in teaching, things like that. So when it comes to not being opinion driven, you should focus on the opportunities for yourself individually, being optimistic, focus on the overt issues, the most important things, like he's saying, focusing on survival, things like that. Now, dropping out the society is really the ideal option for many people. And like I say, rather than being focused on this kind of meme character of being a high status, high value man like a Dan Bilzerian, you want rather be a highly skilled man, whether it's in your career, or be highly focused on being a highly self-sufficient man, if we want to use another phrase there, right? And the other thing is he's mentioning about marriage, right? It's up to an individual whether they get married or not. I've discussed on my channel some of the risks that come with high rates of divorce and the financial risk from a man's perspective. So it's really about thinking through that carefully too. Again, if you're not worried about other people's opinions, then you're going to make smarter decisions. And also, he's got a great point. You know, I'm speaking from my life experience and him too, right? So when you go through life, there's so many people who are just in your life for a season and a reason, right? Maybe you go to the same university as each other, maybe you're co-workers and you're somewhat friends or friendly at work. And the thing is, keeping less people around you really is the way to go. And that's why when people in later stages of their life, they're very picky with who they deal with. Many people are just out to use you for one way or another. Doesn't have to be your money, could be your popularity, could be some skills you have, could be some life advice. And of course we want to help people, but to what extent is that a transactional relationship and people are using you versus it being like a two-way relationship, right? And like I say, so be careful with people. Many people think about risk in life, they think about financial risk, but one of the biggest risks are the people you deal with. They can be quite toxic, energy vampires, joy thieves, gossiping, plotting against you, all types of weird behavior you'll have to deal with, jealous and envy. So I expect just being careful what information you share with people, particularly when you want to take a risk and make a major life change. Now, a key filtering mechanism I use is VGC, values, goals, and culture. So when you're taking risks, does it align with your values? Is it part of your long-term goals? And is it going to put you in an environment where culturally it's a good fit for you? He prefers being in nature, so that's a better fit for him versus being in a kind of corporate environment, right? So it's kind of interesting thinking about that. And as I say about cutting people who are fake friends out, or just people who you just happen to know, that will cut out a lot of the noise he's mentioning here. Friends of convenience, those are all kind of important things to kind of cut out of your life. And when it comes to figuring out who you are, what your goals are, and it should all be driven with your core values. And that's something you need to kind of figure out for yourself. In this case, it's being more independent on the type of rigged society we live in, developing skills for self-employment. I know he's quite focused on, based on his channel, learning different coding languages, focused on particular coding languages and operating software that is not part of the establishment, right? Focusing on Linux. Linux is an alternative to Windows, and I see you might have seen online too, potentially the next version of Windows 12, might be a subscription service. So you already pay for many subscription services, but at least you thought, oh, the operating system I'm using isn't going to be a subscription service. Maybe you have to pay monthly for Netflix and Spotify or Amazon Prime, but do you want to pay monthly for using Windows on your laptop? That's why, the alternatives he mentioned, and I'm sure many of you have heard of an alternative to Windows called Linux. It's not perfect, not all software works on that, but at least there's an alternative. And that's what I mean, it's really a mindset thing. Do you want to be more self-sufficient, regardless if it makes you somewhat of a fringe or outcast from mainstream society, or do you want to be more focused on social status and fitting in, which does come at a cost too, where you don't have as much freedom of thought and opinion as you'd prefer to? And you could start with small things, doing meal prep, developing your cooking and nutrition skills, doing basic DIY, improving your current living space, and then you can build up from that to being more self-sufficient to the point where you might be able to move out and leave a kind of toxic city, if you feel that way, to live more independently in a rural environment. And that's the key message from myself in this video, from Luke Smith, about choosing independence, walking away from society so you can win at life by taking a risk and choosing freedom over stability. So it's a key lesson to learn here, right? Now, if you're interested in these type of innovative career path choices and thinking outside the box, I'm someone who's worked in finance for over a decade at top finance firms such as Goldman's and Morgan Stanley. And I offer a career advice service. There's a link in the description if you want to speak with me directly. I'd be happy to help. And I look forward to speaking to you in the next video. Let me know in the comments how you feel about this type of more freedom, self-sufficient type of lifestyle. 2 recommended videos on your screen right now, and I'll see you next time.